Hi, welcome to the Module 6 Interactive Masterclass. If you are watching this video and you see that there's only a couple of people, that is in part because I have stopped marketing, as I've been saying, and I believe the new marketing strategy will launch at the end of March. And just as a reminder too, there are on the site, there is a document called the Stages of Development of a Couples Therapist that I encourage everyone to read and reread every once in a while, because you will get a lot more out of the academy content if you review occasionally the document entitled Stages of Development of a Couples Therapist. So this month you heard two audios, two sessions with the same couple that I had been working with on and off for a while. And then you saw or heard the narrative therapy framework. And there's also the vulnerability cycle mapping as a tool on the module. And I just wanted to say, as a way of introducing the subject of the sessions, that it's hard to drop in the middle of a treatment process that has been going on for a while. In our treatment, actually, I'm going to stop here. I just wanted to say that because you see me doing a lot of confrontation, especially with her, and you might have some questions about that. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Joan or Michael, and see if you have any questions, and then I'll say some more things, including several things I wish I would have done differently in the sessions.
Well, I guess just commenting on your last comment, Sarah, that things you wish you would have done differently. That's good to hear, I guess, because I don't know, it just kind of speaks to me of the, you know, and you mentioned this as you were talking in one of the videos, that, you know, sometimes you just have to make that judgment call on what you're going to concentrate on, and you don't know till the end really in it how it plays out, if maybe that was correct or if another way might have worked better. And so you're kind of saying that again, that, you know, wishing you would have done differently. So I guess that kind of makes me more I don't know, hopeful, and just that, okay, I don't have to get it right with my decisions or whatever.
Right.
So.
That's a thank you for that comment. I want to say that, and I'm writing, you know, sometimes when the subscribers ask me a question, I feel like I need to write it down so I can address it or make a comment. So I thank you for your comment. I was just telling another person that I supervise that when a couple has a certain interactional cycle, the issues will come back over and over again. So, you know, because she said something to me about, well, here was a missed opportunity. Well, but the opportunity will come back up because their style, their dynamic, the repetition of the dynamic will occur again and again and again. And you can concentrate on one thing one time and another thing another time. And this will be a reoccurring dynamic that is, you know, the opportunity will come. So, so you said it makes you more hopeful that you don't have to get it right. Right, exactly. Exactly. You don't have to get it right. And also, I do make mistakes, and I will point out to a couple. But anyway, any other comments, Joan, or any questions? Or maybe you want Mike, go ahead.
I'll have Michael say something.
Sure. It was interesting to hear their responses as you were trying to kind of get them to go through the vulnerability cycle. It almost felt like they were a little resistant, and it kind of reminded me of some sessions where I have like, I'm wanting to go one way, but the client wants to go another direction. And it seemed like she was even activated as she was describing what was happening. And I'm thinking about the first session more so. She was kind of getting activated, and I was just curious about your choice or and I guess I feel like I struggle with that, because when we're trying to kind of process and then they get activated, do I lean into helping her self-soothe in the moment, or I kind of let it just kind of see if she can diffuse it herself, or do I go back to the activity? So I kind of struggle a little bit about how do I navigate that in, because it's kind of live and it's intimidating at times, because I also don't want to further activate her with whatever direction I'm going in. And so I think that's what I'm thinking about in terms of the first session. And then the second session, I really appreciated. So she was more reflective of how her mood regulation had changed over the course of treatment with you. He was also really exploring his family of origin dynamics and kind of going through the vulnerability cycle in his own way of really kind of allowing you to kind of explore that what a safe or unsafe place might have looked like when conflict was occurring in his family of origin. So I really did appreciate that part of your exploration with him. So thank you.
So thank you for that too. So let me see if I can address the first part that you said. It was interesting to hear the responses, and at my attempt to have them go back and tell me about their cycle, and she was getting activated, and the question is, do I help her self-soothe? Do I keep going? What's the danger she could get even more activated? So right, those are the choices that you have. And I chose to, I think I chose to press ahead with so I think what I was thinking in response to your question about, well, how are you dealing with her activation? I think what I was thinking is she doesn't get that disconnecting and abandon him is part of the cycle. And that's what I was trying to get her to do. And I think it succeeded in the end. In the end, she did realize that abandoning him, disconnecting, going to sleep in the basement. And this is why I mean it's hard to come into a treatment in the middle.
Yeah.
Sometimes she doesn't talk to him for 3 days in a row. So in the prior session, the month before, we had talked about her way of abandoning him. And I said this time it was punishing, and then we had a little bit of a disagreement. I thought she's punishing him, and she said, no, I'm really trying to protect myself, which makes sense, because she used to get, if you think this is activated, she used to get incredibly activated, incredibly aggressive, and incredibly critical. So what you saw is a much milder version of her activation. And this is why I mean it's hard to come into a session, in the middle of a treatment process when you're trying to go a little deeper. But if you, do you remember, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I wonder if you remember when she was getting activated or what she was saying that made you say that? Just to see what alternatives existed, what else, or what I could have done differently?
I guess it was if I remember correctly, it was a portion where she's exploring, I'm not in a place to accept your apology, or I'm not in a place to even talk about it, and you're not respecting it. And then the more he leaned in and saying, well, I gave you a genuine apology, and then she's just getting further and further kind of upset, but you're not hearing me. And I'm maybe inflating what she might have said, but I can tell that she was certainly getting triggered by him, and just him not really understanding her perspective, and perhaps she was feeling invalidated as that was happening. So that's the moment that stands out to me, but I don't remember if that's exactly the portion of.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know that I have any more to say other than
No,
I
no.
made a choice. You know, these are the choices that you are called to make. And my memory of the session is that I kept trying to get them to explain the cycle to me, and so that they would own their own ways in which they trigger their partners, which was not easy. And that was my goal. I maybe that was a mistake, but I didn't want. We had done the vulnerability cycle where I explained it to them, and this time I wanted to, because I think they own it more. The purpose for that is for them to eventually look at the cycle and be able to have more self-compassion for themselves and more compassion for their partner. In other words, once you can access the core beliefs, the survival strategies, and the triggering events, then you can complete the cycle. I always tell the couple, I have good news and bad news for you. The good news is that you will be able to interrupt the cycle if you are aware of the ways in which you react to him or her. The bad news is your vulnerability will continue to be your vulnerability. She's always going to feel not seen, and he's always going to feel inadequate, right? So those core vulnerabilities don't change in a person. They become more manageable, they become more aware, they become more, they have a vantage point from which to look at it. They could end up saying to themselves, oh, this is me getting triggered by her criticism, and I'm feeling inadequate again. Now I have a choice. What do I do? This is the ideal, that somebody who is very aware of the ways in which they react, that they would say this to themselves, oh, this is me being inadequate because of her criticism. Now I have a choice. I can be a jerk back because I feel like she's being a jerk to me, or I can be the bigger guy and say, okay, let me not do that, which is what he was talking about, right? And in addition to that, so that's self-compassion, right? This is me. This is because of my history. This is how I get when she criticizes me. But he could also have some more compassion for her and say to himself, oh, this is her when she feels unseen. This is how she gets when she feels unseen, because of her history, because of where she comes from, because of the way she grew up. So again, the vulnerability cycle, once you have it, it doesn't mean that the vulnerabilities go away. It just means that they can manage them differently. They don't have to be as pernicious and as long. So she will disconnect when she feels not seen, but she might disconnect for 20 minutes as opposed to for a whole night or for 3 days. So Is there a question or a comment you have about what I just said about how to, what the vulnerability cycle mapping does?
No, I really appreciate you kind of breaking down the way you just did, and the reminder that the vulnerability doesn't sort of get extinguished, but more so it's the way they kind of process and work through it when it
It's in
comes
your
up.
body, it's in your brain, that's where you go. You know, that's not gonna change, but the management of it will change, right? Okay. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that had that effect. I also wanted to respond to your comment about, I don't want to further activate her, and I totally agree with that. And I wanted to say that in the treatment, we talked over and over again about flooding and about lower brain and about what happens when she triggers him and what are the things, some of the things she can do to trigger him less. And she worked really, really hard at curbing her aggressive behavior towards him. So I think I was mentioning what you see her activation is like a 10% of what it used to be when we first started treating the cup. When I first started treating, she does it much less, but she still does it. And he gets triggered and becomes offensive and stubborn. She pressures him to engage and she demands an engagement from him. So, and that's what you saw, but it wasn't nearly as much as it used to be when I first met her. She was 100 times worse. So I'm sorry, John, what were you saying?
Yeah, I'm sorry, just wanted to chime in that explains then in the second audio session when she's saying how proud she is of herself for what she's accomplished. I really didn't understand that. I didn't know if that was really authentic or, she was just centering
Oh,
on
I
herself.
could totally see why you would think that it wasn't, right. And this is why it fits with my realization that this is a very tough session to listen to in the middle of a treatment process when you don't know what's going on. So I'm glad I'm making this clarification. So yeah. I mean, she made enormous progress. Right. In fact, he did a little less than she did, which is why I decided to focus in the second session on his individual issues. So, okay. Any other questions or comments?
I guess I have another comment and it's about the second session. And I guess, especially just listening to the audio and listening to her voice and you give the commentary before how she often talks about not feeling safe and how this might just be something she does and kind of like a go-to. And then when she does say that in the session, I don't feel emotionally safe. To me, I could hear that pause and I could hear her like waiting for your reaction. And I loved your reaction. It didn't seem like much of a reaction. I think you just said, what are we going to do today? Like, okay, I heard you. And then I thought, wow, the therapeutic relationship must be really good because it would be very easy for that woman to, just kind of feel miffed or feel missed. And, oh, you didn't even acknowledge that. But she must have got that you did acknowledge it. And, you were going to get back to that. But I just like the way you handled it. I probably would have jumped all over it.
Thank you so much for that comment, Joan, because I forgot to say, and you're reminding me, that this kind of confrontation, I was very confrontive in the first session. And I was quite confrontive in the second one with him. In fact, I wish I had said something differently, and I'll tell you what they are in a little later. But this kind of confrontation requires a very strong therapeutic alliance. I would not have been able to do that in the beginning of a treatment process. I am much more empathic. I am much more, I get it. I'm much more, much more neutral in terms of, I get what you're feeling. I can understand why anybody in your situation would feel the same way. I mean, I'm a lot more neutral to both, like, you know, what some people call multi-partiality. I can be neutral. I can understand where each of them is coming from. And I do a lot more of that in the beginning and get a lot more confrontational when things get stuck or when things regress, when I have a strong therapeutic alliance. So it does require a strong therapeutic alliance for them to trust me that I know what I'm doing and I know what I'm getting at. And I know where what I want to take them. So yeah, that's true. You couldn't do that without a strong therapeutic alliance. So thank you for that. So do you want me to tell you what I think I should have done differently?
Yep.
In the first session, I don't think I ever got to how she triggered him. I don't think I ever got to understand that. You know, what did she do that he felt so, you know, I didn't really go into what actually happened. I only wanted them to tell me their cycle. And in doing that, I don't think it was clear enough what had triggered him. So anyway, that's in re-listening to it, I thought that. Do you have any questions or comments about that? I often don't go into what happened, but I think in this case, I would have liked to have known a little more what she did that triggered him. The second thing is, I asked him, what is so terrible about her not accepting something you're doing? Remember that he apologized and she didn't accept it. And I said, what is so terrible about her not accepting something you're doing? In this case, it was the apology, and he gave me the explanation that he becomes vulnerable and opens up and lays down the walls. And I wish I had empathized a bit more about how hard this is for him. But I took a different path and I didn't do that. And he tolerated it, but I wish I had been a little more empathic about how much progress he had made in that, and laying down what he calls the walls and becoming vulnerable and telling her. And I took a different tack. So I wish I had done that a little more. You know, I was listening to the session and I'm like, oh no, I can't believe I didn't do that. Also about the first session, I wish I had traced the origin of the disconnection as a strategy with her a bit more. So she mentioned something, this is what was done to me, disconnection, and I didn't go back to it. So, you know, I wish I had done that. And I also wish I hadn't said to her, what did you do with that information? So, I mean, that was not a necessary comment. I think it feels a little, I felt like I had been a little more critical than I generally are. And if you've been, you know, if you wonder why I chose the sessions I chose, some of them are precisely because I don't feel so good about them. And this is one of them.
I really appreciate that.
I mean,
Really,
this is
that's
tough.
so helpful. Oh my gosh.
The second session, I wish I hadn't said, that's a powerful statement I just made. I was so full of myself. I don't know if you remember me saying that.
I do.
No, you don't remember me saying that, Michael?
I do.
I don't know,
remember. Yeah.
it doesn't stand out, but
You know, I was talking
Yeah.
to him about, his conditions of worth upbringing, how he was loved and cared for by his father, provided that he did what his father wanted. If he crossed his father or did or wished for something different or wanted something different, he would pay the price of disconnection, actually. Not surprisingly, that's what she does, right? So, I mean, usually they fit like a hole in a peg, couples do. So the price was disconnection, the danger was disconnection. And so we went through all that sequence, and he really responded well to all of that work. And we did a little more of that in subsequent sessions. But I was so proud of what I was talking to him about. I just sounded like I was full of myself. Like, you know, that's a powerful statement I just made. I mean, what kind of a comment is that? That seemed.
so I wonder, Sarah, if you're thinking about it more than they might even be thinking about it anymore.
No, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it from the training point of view.
Okay.
Oops, what happened to Joan?
Yeah.
I lost her video.
I don't know, I wonder if her Wi-Fi was going in and out for a little
Yikes.
bit.
Yeah, Joan, are you still there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can
Yes.
hear you,
I
but I
am
can't
still
see you.
here.
Okay, there you are. There you are.
Okay.
So I'm thinking about it with not so much with them. Yes, I have a wonderful therapeutic alliance with them, and I may have eventually said something like, "Wow, I was sounded too full of myself," but you know, the next time or something like that, and that would have been all I would need to repair. I'm thinking about it from the training point of view. Like, what am I showing you? You know, what kind of work am I exposing you to? So, but I think, so those are the things that I wish I had done differently. I wanted to, do you have any questions or comments about that? Other than the one that you just made, Michael?
I just appreciate your vulnerability about it. Yeah, thanks. I mean, I really do think that you nudged them in a different direction. I mean, it demonstrates how like doing this vulnerability exercise, the cycle exercise can really kind of help them process some of the things that are just underneath that they haven't fully worked through or acknowledged throughout their lifespan. And I think that the thing about the forks, so observing I don't know, he was describing like the imprint,
mom.
yeah, the imprint that the mom made with the fork. And I was like, he probably doesn't even recognize what an impact that has on him until he's able to kind of process it with someone.
Oh,
So,
yeah, that's
very powerful.
that's an
That's
episode
powerful.
that's an episode we went back to more than once. Yes. Thank you. And so the second session is a good example, if we could just move on to that, is a good example of the individual work done with one member of the couple in front of the partner. So most of the session is devoted to talking just to him. And then I had a very strong reaction to her, and I wanted to review that too. So generally, what you hope when you do this kind of deeper work with an individual in front of the partner is that the partner will become more empathic. so you're doing the individual work with partner A, and you're hoping that partner B will become a little more empathic, understanding the struggles that partner A has, understanding the path that partner A has gone through in order to get to that kind of survival strategy, right? So, and instead of that, what I heard her say was, what I said was based on anxiety that she doesn't know if he's going to do the work. And when she doesn't know if she's going to do the work, she becomes preachy. She starts telling him, I need this, I need that. She becomes demanding and preachy. And this is what I mean. This is what you have to do. And I don't know if that was the right thing to do either in that moment. Again, it seemed a little critical, but I think she took it in. I think she got it, but I think it also was a bit critical. I could have gone at it a little bit of a different way. And she did say though, that she does get anxious, that she doesn't know if he's going to do the work. And I could have expanded on that more. So what's the anxiety about? Because she did more work than he did. I mean, she's right. So, and I didn't do that. But I could have expanded a little more on her anxiety and what that meant to her that he wouldn't do. What is she anxious about? And we did go back. So this is one of those things when I say many of the missed opportunities will repeat themselves. So this is one that did repeat itself, and we were able to go back later and other times to her anxiety is, well, if he doesn't tell me what's going in his mind, if he doesn't initiate what's happening to him, I'm afraid to have a child with him. And that was what we ended up talking in subsequent sessions. So I think that's all I had. Do you have any comments or questions about the narrative? I don't know if you were able to listen to the audio of the narrative framework, if you liked it, if you have any comments or questions.
Sarah, could I ask one more question? I'm still in this session, and I think
Sure.
it was the first session. Thank you. When you mentioned that I think it was when you mentioned something you would have done differently. When she mentioned that's the way we did things, or she made a remark about her family of origin or something and you said I should have explored that more. Like, there's probably no hard and set rule, but when someone does mention, patterns and things they used to do in the past, does that tend to be a place to stop and kind of explore, or it just depends on where the conversation is and where you are with the client?
Right. So a good question. Let's distinguish between, let's move a little bit further ahead of what happens after you do the vulnerability cycle. So when she mentioned that that's the way they did things in a family, I don't know if that day or later, it is important to go back there, because once you have the core beliefs, the survival strategies, and the vulnerability, and you can map the cycle as we've been talking about, then you need to understand the origin of the vulnerability. The origin of the vulnerability is family related or peer related. In his case, a lot of his vulnerability about feeling inadequate and an idiot, that he doesn't know what he's doing, comes from bullying by peers during middle school. in addition to the conditions of worth situation that he grew up in. In her case, it comes from a lot of chaos in her family. So we did some work on her family of origin to understand why she disconnects, why she punishes that way, why she gives him the silent treatment, why she gets preachy. So all of those things are her tendencies, her vulnerabilities, her sensitivities. She feels not seen, not taken care of, not paid attention to, and that's when she gets all of that. And so understanding the origin of the vulnerability is important. And that's what I was doing with him in the second session. I didn't do it with her then, but I have done that.
Okay. So you knew that, you knew what her vulnerability, and she did too,
At the time,
because you had done.
no, at the time I did, this was the first time that she connected. And then I got back to it later in an individual session with her in front of him.
Okay.
So
Okay,
that day
I
I
get it.
chose to do an individual session with him in front of her to work on his vulnerability and the origin of his vulnerability. But I didn't do it with her. So when I say I wish I had paid a little more attention, I could have made a little bit of a link more, but I decided not to. And I did it later in other sessions with her.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you sure did. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Oh, because sometimes I start talking and I don't know what I'm saying. So I wanted to go back to something else I did do in the second session, which is when I start my speech about, this is not about what happened, it's about how you reacted and survived. I don't know if you remember that. So often when I do some family of origin work, it's very important to stress that it's not that what you're looking for is to blame the parent. You're just trying to understand the pattern. And the pattern is not so much what the father did, but what he learned and reacted to when the father did what he did. Not so much what the mother did, but what he learned from and reacted to. He could have learned something else. I can't tell you how many times I have to give the example of what other things people can do in reaction to the same set of events. So it's not the event or the behavior of the parents that you're looking for. What you're looking for is what the client learned to do, what the client's survival strategy is, what the client's vulnerability is. If two people are fighting in the room with the door closed, and there's a 6-year-old, I often give this example. What did the 6-year-old do when the two parents are fighting in the room with the door closed? Well, one kid goes to the room, opens the door and says, "Don't fight." So he becomes the fixer. Another child would hide under the table and close his ears and not hear. So he becomes the withdrawer. Another child will, I don't know. Give me more things that kids could do in response to hearing parents fighting and shouting in the room. What's another thing a parent can do? A child can do.
Another one might just run outside and play with their friends and pretend.
Okay, run outside and play with their
denier.
friends. Ignore it. Ignore it. Pretend it's not there. Okay. What else? One or two more.
Sorry, the audio cut out, so I wasn't sure if self-blame was one of them that you mentioned in the beginning.
I didn't. So
Okay.
self-blame, it's
Okay.
my fault. Okay, good. Yeah, good, good. One more. We got self-blame, we got distraction, we got fixer, we got. Anyway, you get the
Denier.
idea. Sorry.
No, I said denier, denying it,
Yeah.
just running outside and playing.
Running that time playing, ignoring the. Okay, so you get the idea that it's not what actually happened or what the parents or the siblings or the peers did to a client. It's what the client did that got reinforced over the years, over and over again. This is what makes their behavior so inflexible. They don't have a wider repertoire of options for behavior. So every time she screams at him, he does what he did when he was growing up, which is to try to appease her, to be better and to be good so that she doesn't get disappointed with him. That's what he did growing up. I want you to love me. I don't want you to abandon me. And I want to do what you want me to do so that I don't get abandoned. And that's what she does with her, and has only a narrow set of options to respond. And our therapy works because we're trying to expand the set of options in terms of responses. That's what therapy does. And so again, going back to what I was saying, this is not about, don't go and blame your father for what he did. Don't go and blame your mother for it. It's about you. This is not about them. This is about you. What you learned from that, what you responded. And I give the example, so different children may have responded differently, and you chose that one, but many people don't think that this is a choice, which is another thing that we do in therapy. We show them that they have a choice to make when they get triggered into doing the same thing over and over again. And some therapists make the mistake of only thinking about what was done to the child and not how the child responded to what was done, which is the most important thing. Anyway, you heard me talk about this before, Michael, but for you, Joan, you haven't, so I'm glad to say it again. I don't know if I've ever said this, and I think I've covered some of this stuff in prior Zoom calls, but I'm never always important reminder so that people don't go in. So, because you see a lot of people who start therapy and they cut off with their parents, right? They cut off with their parents because the therapists are talking about what the parents did to them rather than what they learned and how they reacted and what they coped and the survival strategy. Okay, so we're getting to the end of the time. Michael, any other question or comment, or Joan, any other questions or comment about anything?
I do. I'll try to keep it short. So I'm just because I have to go. Actually, no, I just want to make a comment. I think that in the first session, I was really hearing how the narrative was really stuck. So thinking about the other handouts around narrative therapy, you can hear how the narrative shifted by the second session. And so it's really sort of just embedded or underneath everything that they're saying, but they're not really acknowledging it. But it's pretty evident as you hear her describe where we are stuck in our argument. We're just stuck here. And then the other one, we're really progressing. We're in a different space. Look how much we've changed or I've changed. So it's great to kind of hear it from their own words of saying they're observing that happening for themselves. So that's all I wanted to mention.
Yeah, and when I re-listened to the narrative therapy framework for today, because I recorded that like a year ago, and I recorded it after the session with them. I wish I had done more narrative therapy questions with them in the session. That one of them would have been, how do you want to be perceived by her? And he would have said, maybe I've done that before, but I was thinking about that, the narrative therapy questions I was trying to teach you all about. What perception how do you want to be perceived by her? And he may have said, I want her to see me as a adequate, or lovable, or whatever he would have said. And then I may have added, and when she doesn't perceive you as such, what happens to you when you don't? And I asked a variation of that question about how hard it is for him when she doesn't perceive him in a good light. And I think that would have, and then, the follow-up question to that would be, well, how would you have narrowed that gap? You say you want her to perceive you as lovable, and you say she doesn't, and it bothers you. So one of the questions is, why it bothers you so much when she doesn't think you're perfect, which is a problem for a lot of men, But the other aspect of it is to bridge the gap between the way he wants to be perceived and the way he acts. So when he acts like a jerk, she's not going to perceive him as lovable. So you say you want to be perceived as lovable, and are you acting in accordance to the way you want to be perceived? I think this is an important question that comes from the narrative therapy perspective, to bridge the gap between how people want to be perceived and if what they're doing is consistent with the way they want to be perceived. Okay, so Michael, I know you're gonna sign off, and
Yes.
I'm gonna stop the recording, but not stop the meeting. So Joan, you and I can